Thanks for joining us. The Cowboys have wrapped up OTAs. Got C Rock and Simpleton with me tonight. Booze Man ought to be joining shortly. How's it going, guys?
Doing well, and yourself?
Doing great. I mean, I'm all excited. Been watching OTA videos and watching press conferences, and man, just getting so hyped up. It's hard not to be hyped up this time of year.
Yeah, it's going good over here too. It's nice not having work tomorrow because of the big holiday, so I get tomorrow off and enjoying life.
Exactly, and we got a month to enjoy, right? Cowboys have made some big moves since the last time we talked. Simp, let's go back to the draft. We were all really expecting big things. Wide receiver was the big thing. A lot of us were thinking. How'd it turn out?
When we talked, I think the week of the draft, we were talking about O line and potentially trading down and doing all these things. And, we assumed the receiver was probably top of the list and talking about different things corner, D tackle. But I remember specifically talking about Zabel and Booker and how I think over the last 10, 12 years, Callahan with the zone heavy run scheme that continued after he left with Garrett and then even with Moore. Zabel really fit that. He was like almost really the ideal fit for that philosophy and that scheme. But I said that Booker was the better fit, in my opinion, for what I saw Arizona doing last year with Adams
Hmm.
and kind of some of the run schemes that and even really Riley, what he did in North Dakota State and Kansas State. It's power first, a lot of gap scheme stuff. It's not a lot of especially not outside zone, a little bit of inside zone, but it's more of an emphasis on power at the point of attack, not necessarily mobility, athleticism, so on and so forth. And we also were saying I think all of us liked Zabel. All of us liked Booker. We pretty much agreed that we probably, of course, we'd prefer to trade down. Might not be the best value at 12, but with the way the draft actually went, uh, I mean, these interior offensive linemen guards really they were. I mean, they were flying off the board. You had obviously we took Booker at 12. Zabel went at 18. Donovan Jackson went I think 24, 25 to Minnesota. Savanea went 37, 38 to the Rams. So you had four guards because Jackson is going to be a guard in Minnesota. You had four guards taken in the first 35, 37 or so picks. And honestly, I do not think that we would have, if we would have traded down much past about 18 to 20, Booker wouldn't have been there. I mean, him and Zabel might have both been gone. So in hindsight, it ended up making a bit more sense. And then, of course, with the Pickens trade, at the time, I think we were all concerned cornerback, receiver, all these things. How do we fill all these holes? We ended up not taking a receiver, obviously. But if you would have told me when we were on the clock at 12 that we would get Ravel in the third, that we would end up trading a third for Pickens, doing all these things, Booker would have really been at the top of the list for me, along with Harmon. Harmon would have been my top choice. Maybe Warren, you could argue, but trading for Pickens, I think, kind of would have cooled me on taking a tight end in the first, and then Booker because you're not going to obviously take a receiver if you know you're going to get Pickens. You're not going to take a corner. We ended up getting an edge rusher, so guys like Mike Green, who I thought could have been considerations. Michael Williams, well, he was off the board, but Shamar Stewart, so on and so forth. As it was playing out, there were things that I think we were all wondering about, but in hindsight, it really ended up working out pretty well, surprisingly well, actually.
Yeah. Well, and despite Tyler Guyton's kind of rocky year last year, it's honestly, I kind of hate to say it, but it's hard to argue against them with first line O linemen. I mean, it's like one of the few things they just seem to nail.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like Booker's the safe pick in my opinion, but it is interesting because it's like I think both myself and Simp we very much love Derek Harmon, but Derek Harmon went 21st overall, and you got like somebody like Kenneth Grant going right after Booker, and you've got Walter Nolan going at 16, and it's like I would not have necessarily wanted either of those guys at pick 12. I certainly wouldn't have wanted either of those guys at pick 12. So it's hard because in hindsight, I'm looking at it, I go like Golden didn't go till 23. That would be crazy to take him at 11. But had we taken Golden or at 12, had we taken Golden 12, I probably wouldn't have batted an eye at the time. So
Right.
At minimum, Booker's a safe pick. I think he'll be a really good starter for us. I don't love picking a guard at 12 unless it's, your Zach Martin types, but I think he'll be really good, and I don't think we'll look back on it and hate him like we have some first round picks.
Yeah, I do think 2 3 years from now we're gonna look back on it. I would have been okay with Grant honestly at 12. I would have had the same opinion as Booker. A little bit of a reach, not a huge reach. Fills a position of need. Probably gonna be a good player. Harmon, of course, was I thought he was the most well-rounded defensive tackle outside of Graham. But I do think with how everything played out, getting Ravel in the second, trading for Pickens, filling needs, elsewhere, I do think we're going to look back on this in a couple years. And I mean, I think Booker, his floor is a good starter, like a guy you can count on, who basically a better like Ronald Leary, I would say, as a floor. I think he could easily make multiple Pro Bowls. Could easily be a future Hall of Famer. Obviously, that percent chance of that we could get into all that. It's obviously not a slam dunk, but I think he's probably going to be one of the better guards in the league. But I do think obviously the biggest need on defense right now, and some people might not agree with this, but I do think we are actually quietly solid almost everywhere on defense. Cornerback, you have the injuries, so we got to see how that works out. Aside from that, I think we're pretty solid everywhere except for one technique. And obviously, stopping the run, all this, we all know the story. So I do think that if the defense continues to struggle against the run, if Kenneth Grant, Earl Harmon, or even Nolan, and I think Nolan is really more of a pass rusher than anything, so I don't think he would have solved much with the run game. But if the defense still keeps struggling that way, and we can't get off the feet, or we can't get teams into third and long, and Micah continues to be neutralized because it's constantly 2nd and 5, and so on and so forth. I think we're going to look back on it as a choice between Booker and solidifying the interior of the offensive line versus solidifying the interior of the defensive line with a run stopping D tackle.
Exactly right. And I just wish that they could be so possessed about the defensive line the way they have been with the offense for the last 10 to 15 years. On that note, though, speaking of the one tech Toya in the seventh rounder, I know it's too much to expect for most D tackles as rookies anyway. But what do either you expect from Toya this season?
It's funny. I remember mentioning his name during the draft just because it was like, we got into that day three, and I was like, who's legitimately just a pure defensive tackle, and I was like, that's the dude. So I mean, if you want a guy that's going to specialize purely in like, hey, I'm going to hold my ground, I'm going to stop the run, I'm going to just be a nose tackle and not really anything else. I mean, I think that's that kind of guy. Now, of course, anytime you don't get a guy like that till the seventh round, you immediately kind of fall into that. Well, is he really that good? Well, I don't know that he's ever going to be anything more than just a pure rundown nose tackle, but I do think he can at least do that. And if that's what we're really needing, then I say why not? I mean, I don't see a reason why he wouldn't be able to contribute as a run stuffing nose tackle right away.
Yeah, I if we would have taken him in the fifth, I would have been pleased with it. So I was pretty excited with in the seventh. I agree. I mean, I think he'll be, as of rookie, a solid rotational run stuffer. Probably play. Yeah, there'll probably be some games where he doesn't play much. He might even be inactive, but there will be others against running teams, the Eagles primarily. Maybe not the first game of the year, just because obviously rookie first game and all that. But like later in the year, as you play these sorts of teams, Washington, where probably play 25 or so snaps. I don't think it's completely unrealistic. I don't think the scenario where Mozzie completely busts out this year, let me rephrase that. I could easily see a scenario where Mozzie flames out this year. Toya ends up as like almost a pseudo starter, taking his role last year where he was playing. Mozzie was playing about 30-ish snaps a game. It's not impossible. I'd be surprised just because I think Mozzie, you know, he he's he's not worth the pick that we spent on him, obviously. But the last half of last season, he was not horrendous, which it's not a glowing
Mhm.
recommendation necessarily, but it's an
It was an
improvement on what he
improvement.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he can. He's never going to be on the field when it's 3rd and 8. You know what I mean? He's always just going to be like a first and second down type guy who's just going to sit in there, hold his gap, play the run. But once the defense kind of turned the corner a bit last year, and we got a bunch of the injured guys back, and they started to kind of like, gel a bit in Zimmer's scheme, he wasn't that bad. The run defense wasn't that bad. And against some pretty decent running teams too. Even that Eagle game where Barkley was going nuts in the second half, the game was completely out of hand at that point. It was like 24-3 or something. Rush
Mhm.
is turning it over every other drive. All like it's you can't take anything away from that. In the first half, Barkley had a bunch of touches and he was averaging about 2 yards a carry. I don't know. I just think the hate it's almost like a cliche at this point where, yeah, I mean, he's not worth a first round pick, but if we would have taken a guy like this in the late second or the third, and this is how his first 2 years went, would we be like that
Yeah.
upset about it?
Well, I think the Mozzie hate is still because Taco was so fresh in our minds. I think it's residual hate from the Taco deal. It's like another Michigan guy we wasted a first rounder on. You're right. It did seem like it was starting to click for Mozzie later on. Go ahead, C-Rock. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say with Mozzie, it almost seemed like his rookie year was just kind of a lost rookie year.
Hmm.
If you could take his second year and call that his rookie year, I think I'd be a lot more excited about him going into year two based on some of the flashes we saw last year. It's just the rookie year was so odd and off. He lost all that weight. He really just I didn't think he
Hmm.
flashed at all as a
Yeah.
rookie. But then last year there was a couple games where I was like, Mozzie kind of would turn it on. I'd be like, if he could just find that consistency from a game to game basis, he could actually be a pretty solid player. And my hope is that maybe he can start finding some of that going into next year. It's hard when you think about it as year three as opposed to like if you were considering this year two, I think it'd be a different story.
They say it does take those D tackles some time to develop some time, but that's not always comforting to wait on when he's taken in the first round. Kind of shifting gears a minute, though, let's talk about the culture shift going from Big Mike to Brian Schottenheimer. Do y'all feel that he may be going maybe a little overboard to try to be a player's coach?
I mean, who really knows at this point, honestly? Some of the stuff he's doing is cheesy, and he's probably trying a little bit too hard to be like Carroll. But one thing I'll say, at the very least, it's something different. You know what I mean? I think things had
Mhm.
gotten stale with McCarthy. I think part of that was probably the fault of ownership, with the way that they treated him and kind
Well,
of.
that dead last year, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, that never
exactly. I
should have
mean,
happened.
not doing anything in free agency and just kind of, you had to move on. And I think just having any new voice who is somewhat competent, would kind of have people on alert. One thing I do appreciate about Schottenheimer, aside from all players coach or doing these things off the field and family and all this stuff that he talks about,
Hmm.
for a very long time we had this very insular. I mean, the organization is insular. They had Garrett, and that was insular because he barely knew
Hmm.
anything outside
Yep.
of Dallas pretty much throughout his most of his career. And Schottenheimer has been around. He's coached with a lot of teams, a lot of different coaches. Obviously, his dad. He seems extremely open to bringing in new. I don't even want to say open. He seems to seek out new perspectives and like people he doesn't know and like picking people's brains. And I think you can tell
Mhm.
that by the staff that he hired, where you
Oh yeah.
have like the receiver coach from college, you have Riley, the O line from college, Clayton Adams running like a more modernized like run scheme and O
It's
line scheme.
what we've been wanting for years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know what his like player management exactly is going to look
Hmm.
like, and maybe he's going to go too far into being the buddy coach. But I
Yeah.
still go back, and I've said this on the board a couple times. The most important coach throughout his life, the most important coach that made an impact on him throughout his life,
Yeah.
undoubtedly
Yeah.
was his father, and his dad was one of the biggest hard asses in NFL history. So it's hard for me to imagine. Like we know he's not going to be exactly like his dad, and nor should he really in this day and age. But
Yeah.
it would be very hard for me to imagine him completely being on the opposite end of the spectrum where he's just way too soft all the time and just lets players do whatever they want. And I mean, even in his press conferences, if you listen to him, couple of come out of the last couple of weeks during OTAs, he almost in every one of them says something about like, oh, I know my dad's looking down at me and saying like, what the hell are you
Mhm.
doing? Like, you should be practicing harder than this because now they can't practice like they used to. So it would be very hard for me to imagine his dad and his dad's voice not constantly being in the back of his mind. So I'm not overly worried about it. We'll see how the season plays out.
At least for now, it seems like the players are buying into it. The only thing I struggle with is I wonder what's going to happen if we lose a few games in a row and players start pointing fingers at each other. It's like in my mind, I'm just like suddenly the ping pong table in the room is going to become a point of distraction as opposed to like, oh, hey, this coach is so awesome. This is making it so that we bond so well. Those things suddenly turn from positives to massive negatives, and so we'll see. I mean, the players buying in right now, and maybe just given the talent on this team, and I love some of the assistant coaches we put in place around him. If we can start hot and kind of carry with that, maybe we never have to worry about what happens if the team goes through kind of a losing streak that has players upset.
Yeah, well, it seemed like the first part of our schedules was kind of tough, if I recall. It could certainly happen. I mean, first year coach, who knows? Maybe the thing that's going to be tough for this first year coach is having all these superstars. We have the highest paid quarterback, one of the highest paid wide receivers, and they're taking their time signing one of the greatest defenders in the league. What's it going to take to get him signed? What are they waiting for?
You tell me.
I think they're waiting for TJ to sign just so they can beat his deal.
I mean, you would hope that's not the case, but when it comes to extensions and contract negotiations, any sort of stupidity when it comes to Steven and this team wouldn't surprise me. I think it's going to take about 42 a year at this point. If Watt signs an extension for 42, it'll probably take 43 or 44. I mean, Micah recently said they're costing themselves money, and he's right. He also said in the not too distant past that he doesn't have to be the highest paid player in the
Right,
league,
yeah. I
and blah
mean,
blah
it
blah. So
eventually shifted. I mean, but in his
yeah,
defense, it's been a while now.
yeah. There's no logic for how these guys manage these sorts of things. Like, they do really well in the draft. We know what the situation is with free agency, how they approach that, and they were decent enough this year.
Hmm.
There's literally no logic that can be applied to what they do in these sorts of situations. Like, we all knew, I'm sure the three of us probably posted about it, saying pretty much this exact thing that I'm about to say. We all, like, this time last year and months before, last, April 2024, February 2024, we knew damn good and well exactly what it was going to take to extend Lamb. We knew they were going to pay him before the season started. We knew there's no chance they're going to go into the season without him. Jefferson got an extension, so that changed it a little bit. But we knew exactly what it was going to be, and it ended up being almost exactly what we thought it would be. And they still drag their heels and screw around and do God knows what. So I'm sure they're going to do something similar here. Because Parsons has been around the OTAs, he's not sitting out. He's playing nice. I do think there's a decent chance that it gets done like right around the start of training camp, and that it doesn't drag almost to like the end of August like it did with Lamb. But God only knows, with these guys.
Yeah, the crazy thing to me is I literally feel like if Jerry wanted to get the deal done tomorrow, it could be done tomorrow. But it's almost like they don't want to do it yet because they just love the drama and attention it brings. And I know that sounds crazy. It sounds crazy even saying it, but it's like in Jerry's warped mind, it's the more drama you can create, the more headlines you can have, the more attention your team gets. And I almost really feel like he's dragging his feet because it's just another way to bring attention to the team and have articles written about him.
Yeah, there's honestly no other reason to do that. I mean, like we said earlier, I mean, it should have been done a year ago. Like this, why wasn't this done a year ago? It's so frustrating.
And I'll tell
But
you right now, if they were smart, they would be looking to get a Tyler Smith deal done right now. Or maybe they even be looking to extend bland,
Bland, yeah.
depending on the price. But if they were smart, they would look to get Tyler Smith extended right now. But they're going to do the exact same BS, and we'll be here this time next year talking
Yep.
about what's it going to take for Tyler Smith? What are they going to? And they're going to do the exact same thing
Well,
where
yeah.
they screw around into training camp and they end up extending him, making him one of the highest paid players in his position. And we're all going to sit here like, yeah, these guys are idiots. It makes no sense. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's as soon as that Micah deal is done, I mean, they're going to take their cap off, I'm sure, and be done for a while. It's going to take a lot out of them. To your point earlier, though, it was great to see Micah at all the OTAs because he wanted to be there. And one of you mentioned how he couldn't stand anymore. He had to get out there and get in some drills. So that's great to see.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, he loves the game. I think he wants to be great. I'm not worried about paying him. Like I wasn't worried about paying Lamb. I knew he'd be good, and he was excellent last year. Over under for when he signs his extension, I'd probably put it at about August 16th.
Sounds about
Yeah,
right. Keep him out of a little bit of preseason games because he hasn't signed an extension. He wasn't going to play anyway because we don't play anybody in preseason.
right. I mean, I guess it's something we should be used to. You know, we've been through two lengthy Dak Prescott contract negotiations, so it's just how they do business.
And they way overpaid there. So we know there's no chance Parsons is going anywhere. I do think at some point, if I were them, I wouldn't do it with Parsons. I wouldn't have done it with Lamb, but with a relatively high profile, because I forget who it was. There was some like former exec or something talking about like agents know that you can play the Cowboys like a fiddle because if they can sit there and say, oh well, Jerry can hem and haw and all this stuff. Player sits out. I mean, Dak's the only one who hasn't sat out, but you knew he was playing hardball. Player sits out. The team sits on their hands. Eventually, they cave. They make the player one of the highest paid in the league, and they go on from there. So I don't think that cycle will break until they have the balls to trade a relatively like high profile player who's in that situation. I wouldn't do it with Parsons. I mean, who knows, depending on the deal. But I would keep that if I were them. I would keep that in the back of my mind. Who only they probably don't care. They're focused on investing in Blue Star, whatever BSing around real estate. So
Blockchain. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you talk about multiple firsts for anybody, but then no doubt we could get picks for Micah, but then do you even trust them to bargain a good deal in something like that? I sign this guy who's like one of the greatest of his generation.
yeah. I wouldn't do it with Parsons. I wouldn't do it with Parsons.
Yeah.
He's too important, and the team. I mean, you back yourself into this corner with Dak and his contract. So it's like, what are you going to do? You're going to trade Parsons right now, and then you're sitting on this large contract with the quarterback, and you tear the team down around them. And I mean, the defense. I mean, the pass rush. I do think people. I don't know. People aren't really talking about it. I don't really know why, but I think the pass rush potentially, if they can stop the run, big if Mozzie can be a slightly above average one tech and they can stop the run, I think we're going to have one of the best pass rushes in the league. I mean, we were top three, top five in the league in sacks last year. Parsons was out for several games. Lawrence was out all year pretty much. We had other guys injured as well. I think the pass rush, people, we talk about the draft, and of course we start talking about Booker immediately and all these things. Ezraku, to me, if we would have traded down to like 22, 24, and taken Ezraku, I wouldn't have batted an eye. To me, he's a guy that should have went like early 20s, mid 20s. Getting him in the second, to me, it's really probably our best second round pick in the last 10, 15 years. Diggs was up there. To get a guy like that, it's almost like a second first round pick. Pair him with Parsons. We signed Fowler. Osa is, I mean, I think a bit underrated, at least on the board. Solomon Thomas is a better interior pass rusher than a lot of the guys that we've had next to Osa over the last couple of years. Then you throw in, if you can get anything from Williams, second round
Oh,
pick Nealand, who I think is going
Nealon,
to
man.
be,
Yeah, I think he's
I,
ready to.
I think he, yeah, I think he's going to be at least a Dorrance Armstrong caliber player. Maybe not
Yeah.
exactly what you want out of a second round pick, but he's going to be a solid player. You put all that together, depending on how quickly Izaraku can get going, there is a lot there. a lot. And we were considering that you have Parsons, one of the best in the league. Last year, we're top whatever it was, top 3, top 5 in the league in sacks. And who do we have outside of Parsons and Osa? Chauncey Golson,
Right. I mean,
Carl
and when
Lawson.
and when Parsons was
We're
out, I
losing
mean, it
every
was like nothing.
yeah, and we're trailing half the time in most of these games because Dak's out. They started the year even with Dak poorly, of course. So the defense was not in optimal conditions to be rushing the passer. Depending on Izaraku and how quickly he gets up to speed, this pass rush could be better than anything we had under Quinn, which is some people might think is a ridiculous statement, but I think it could be.
I don't disagree, and I actually think Fowler plays a pretty big part of that. I think he's a very underrated player. I'm really not sure why the Redskins let him go. For a guy that's had double digit sacks last year, he's had double digit sacks previously in his career. Even under Quinn, he just didn't get that many snaps. But in terms of like pass rush win rate, his pressures on a per snap basis, he's a damn good pass rusher. And I think Fowler kind of gets overlooked as what I think is probably the sneaky best addition we've had in this offseason in terms of free agency. Then you pair that with Easy, is which I don't want to say as Raku, I guess I can, but I think he's going to be phenomenal. I mean, you watch what he did in college, and it is legitimately a joy to watch. We had a lot of our debates about like Jalen Walker in the draft and some of these other guys that didn't really produce, but they've got, the body type and the potential. Easy, he's got this. His size is fine, but man, is he fun to watch. His pass rush repertoire is just so diverse. He can beat you around the edge. He's got all kinds of moves, and he knows how to set up one move with another. And I really think he's a guy that could potentially take off very early in his career, just as purely as a pass rusher.
Yeah, and you look at the teams that or the personnel that we had under Quinn, and my biggest complaint, and I think we even had conversations about this on the board as far as like taking a defensive end like in the first, in like 2022 or 2023 or whatever. And my argument was always we have Parsons on one side. Obviously, he draws so much attention. Teams, can't leave him single, and single blocked. The rest, like we did not have, Lawrence was like later career, still pretty good, but like he didn't have the same explosiveness, the same bend around the edge that he had earlier in his career. He was more of like a power rusher. Dorrance Armstrong was the same thing, where he's more of like a bull power rusher. He's not just going to get upfield, get to the upfield shoulder with his burst, bend around the edge, get low, and get to the quarterback. Like it's more like pushing the pocket, constricting the pocket with power. And my biggest complaint was we didn't have that other guy who had that like explosiveness, who could get around the edge. I mean, obviously not like Parsons. Parsons is one of one really in many ways, but someone who had the ability. I mean, Fowler would fit that to an extent. His bend isn't quite, as he's gotten older, isn't quite what it used to be. That was always my biggest complaint. And now that we added someone like that who is going to see single blocking almost all the time, as long as they can get into 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, I don't see really how you stop it. Teams are going to have to max protect. They're going to have to roll the pocket. They're going to have to, bootlegs and do things like that. After Abdul Carter, Michael Williams, Shamar Stewart, these guys were ranked high, and, I like them to varying extents. But to me, the best pure edge rushers after Carter were Green and Ezaraku. Green with the off field, who knows what. But in terms of guys who have a pass rush plan, who have counter moves, who have the burst, who have the bend, it was Green and Ezaraku. Jalen Walker, I liked him a lot, but more in like a hybrid type role. He does not have anywhere near the counter moves, pass rush plan, hand usage, or even the bend. Like the quiet thing about Walker is I almost never saw him really bend well when I watched him. Like it was more almost like power, hustle. Like I never really saw him just like bend the edge really tight. And Green as Araku really do it. Yeah, I mean as a pure edge rusher, I'm taking them over Walker.
Well, when we talk about that pass rush, it actually makes the job of the secondary so much easier, right? But our secondary, as good as it's been the last couple of years, it's getting older. Donovan Wilson is out, right? I believe he's been injured through OTAs, and some of our younger guys are having to step up. Who are some of these younger secondary players you think are actually going to make a difference this year?
I mean, what really caught my eye, and as much as any of this OTA stuff can, means anything or is significant, but what really caught my eye was that they're apparently trying Wanye Thomas in the
Mm,
slot a decent bit, which
yes.
I could see it making sense, especially against like bigger slot receivers, tight ends, those kinds of like move tight ends. I think it would make a lot of sense. But I think he's a guy that it wouldn't shock me if he beat out Wilson to start. I don't think he will, but I'm just saying it wouldn't shock me. I think he's a guy that coaching staff probably has a lot of confidence in. And I think he before he got hurt last year, his playing time was going up. I think he's going to see the field quite a bit. Elam, of course, I think it seems that the coaching staff loves him. Glowing reports coming out of OTAs again for whatever that means.
Well, yeah,
But it is possible that it's possible that he's a guy, former first round pick. I thought he played when I watched some of his all 22 last year, particularly the AFC Championship game. He played almost the whole game. He gave up a couple catches, like 4 catches for like 35, maybe 40 yards. He wasn't getting killed over the top. He gave up like a comeback or two, like a slant for like a guy who projects as potentially our third or even fourth cornerback, depending on health. Did not look terrible, and it's possible that new coaching staff, new scheme. There's some, he was drafted relatively recently, so that's probably fresh in like Eberflus's mind, in the DB coach's mind. So I could see it possibly being just like a scheme thing where like they have a better plan for what he does well, whereas Buffalo, thought they were getting a guy who could do most things or all things, and maybe he only excels at some things, and some of those things are what like Eberflus wants to run. You know what I mean? Like zone heavy,
yeah,
whatever. So I think those are the two guys that I have my eye on as far as like young guys in the secondary.
Yeah, the secondary is interesting, especially corner, because it's like if everybody was healthy, like you'd be saying like Bland, Diggs, and Revel would be, I don't know, possibly an elite secondary. But the problem is Revel and Diggs aren't healthy, and you're kind of just trying to survive till the second part of the season. But I think there's
yeah,
potential that if you can survive the first half, that by the second half, it could be really exciting when you got Diggs, Diggs and Revel on the outside with Bland sitting there in the slot. I mean, that's a pretty cool setup if you ask me. And if Elam's at least proven to be solid by then suddenly he's your fourth corner, and we don't even have to get down to guys like Kalen Carson, who I
yeah.
was
That's yeah.
hopeful for last year. And
He's almost an afterthought anymore. The seatbelt. Almost forget that he's even on the team.
funny how a guy with one bad rookie year, you can go from sort of like a darling and a late round pick we're all excited about to, now it's like we've all kind of written him off as non-existent.
Yeah,
And that's also a cautionary tale for like reading too much into these OTA reports, mini camp reports, so on and so forth. Like it's fun because we don't have anything like this is literally the deadest time of year in the
right.
entire, calendar
Yeah,
year for football. If you think back to a lot of the hype was around what he was doing in training camp, the reports, quote unquote. I don't remember. He was okay in preseason. I think I don't remember. I don't have like a really clear memory of him making a bunch of plays like Bland. I think had at least one, if not two, picks in preseason, and then he had a couple picks early on when he played like first couple games before Jordan Lewis got hurt. But Carson, I mean, Carson was a fifth round pick, I think, fifth, maybe sixth. That's not a guy you would expect. Like, okay, we were optimistic about him when he was drafted, potentially being like a third, fourth corner long term. Like, just because a guy that you take that late in the draft doesn't end up becoming that as a rookie doesn't mean, oh well, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, I could easily see him being like a good fourth corner for us this year. When Diggs and or Revel are out. I could also see him, getting cut in training camp. We have no idea exactly,
yeah.
but nothing would really surprise me too much.
You mentioned Wanye kind of moving around. It seemed like earlier in maybe as a mini camp or something, they mentioned Mukuwamu, who I thought had played fairly well in a little bit of time he got in safety, actually moving back down to corner. Didn't he play in college? But Anyway, I haven't heard any more about that. I guess that's the Muku experiment may be about done. This is his fourth
I
year,
don't
I
know what the
think. So,
deal is with him, honestly. I mean, he played amazing in the slot against Godwin in
hmm
that playoff game against Tampa, like 2022 season, and then basically just a special teamer from there on out. I mean, I think he might be a guy, and this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, who, given his size, is better in the slot than he is at outside corner, and maybe that's part of it. I mean, I'm curious. I think if they sense that Diggs and Ravel are gonna miss like the first 6 weeks or whatever the season gonna be on PUP, both of them, I think they're gonna sign Gilmore. If they don't, I mean, it's anybody's
yeah,
guess what we're gonna see. I mean, I think Bland and Elam would be the starting outside corners, and then some combination of guys in the slot, or maybe move Bland in the slot in nickel and dime, and you have guys, someone else outside. It's going to be interesting. I mean, it is extremely strange because I feel comfortable where we're at for the most part. Like C Rock said, you have Diggs, you have this, you have that. You could have
hmm
you like we could be here in November with the best top four corner trio in the league.
fresh too. So,
But then you have the injuries, and we could have, God knows who as our slot corner week one. So, strange situation.
well, Gilmore is definitely a nice backup for sure. It's convenient that he hasn't signed anywhere else. Going back over to the offensive side, man, I've been seeing some glowing reports on the hyphenated tight end. What are you thinking with Ferguson and Scooney? Can they hold off Brevin Spanford? He looks like he's ready to take over the number one.
Again,
Too
OTAs,
early.
mixing and matching lineups. And it's like, look, if he's running with the ones consistently in training camp, and Ferguson is playing like in the third quarter of like, or rather, I guess I'll put it if he's sitting out preseason games and then like Ferguson's playing or something like that, then they'll have my attention. But until then, like, I would be completely shocked if Ferguson wasn't starting.
Kind of
I
seems
think
like it
last
may
season
just be
was
like
a
a motivating
yeah.
thing, maybe for the 1 and 2 there.
I think I think they like him, and Ferguson is this last year of his contract. I think they like Spanford, and I think having three tight ends, Spanford might be our best blocking tight end also. So I mean that's important. So if you can develop him as a receiver, he could jump up the depth chart. But I just can't see him improving so much that he supplants Ferguson, who I think in a contract year is going to be a lot closer to 2023 Ferguson than what we saw last year.
I did want to mention just a quick note. I had this written down to talk about earlier, but I forgot about it. So we spent the last two drafts without a fourth rounder. Trey Lance, first year. Mingo this past year. Next year we have no third. We saw how in this past draft you're thinking, wow, that fourth round is the sweet spot for getting a good running back or this or that. And man, to think now, no third. No third, but we got our receiver.
Yeah, I'm okay with it personally. I mean, talk to me next April. I'll probably be saying
Right.
something different, but especially if they don't re-sign Pickens or he doesn't play well or whatever.
Oh
But
man.
he really could kind of change things. Like he could be a real difference maker offensively, not
hmm
because he himself is one of the best receivers in the league, but he's such a good complementary guy, or potentially such a good complementary guy to Lamb, who is one of the top five receivers in the league, and not just as like, okay, well he's a really good receiver, one of the best number twos. Like someone like Jalen Waddle is also, someone like Jordan Addison is also, Devontae Smith. But Pickens, and this is one of the reasons I think they loved McMillan so much, they wanted a big bodied receiver who can play the X, who can go up and make contested catches, that will allow them to continue moving Lamb all around and the slot outside, get matchups for him. Having someone like Pickens or McMillan makes that a lot easier as opposed to someone like Addison or Jalen Waddle, who you have to move around, and they themselves are at their best, like in the slot, in
hmm
motion, doing all these things. So having someone like Pickens, who is as good as he is and fits like strategically in terms of like play style and what he's good at. Who knows what we'll get after this season? Who knows if he'll be re-signed? But I do think we're going to get a very motivated player. We'll get a comp pick if he leaves. And I think the offense, the passing game could be really explosive. One thing I'll say is, last year on the board, I said a couple times, like, the over under for our wins last season was like 10, I think. And I was like,
Hmm.
I'm hammering that under. Uh, and, I think I have a usually pretty good feel for where this team is at. And I mean,
You can
once they get
sense
into the
the
playoffs,
effort they
got
put
them.
into it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's just
Well, yeah, they put more effort into it. There's a little bit more excitement with the new coaching staff. I think Adams is going to bring a lot to
yeah.
the running game. Obviously adding Pickens and doing all this stuff, and they had
Well,
a good draft as well.
and also last season the absolute lack of effort. You knew they were not committed to Mike. I mean, you knew it was coming to
Yeah,
an end. There's no investment in that season. It was a lost season.
yeah. It was like a dead man walking last year. We all
Yeah.
knew it, and we were hoping that the team on paper was relatively talented, and we were hoping that would win out. I mean, they had won 12 games 3 straight years, and I think, well, okay, going into the season, I was like, well, I don't see them winning more than 10. I could see them winning 10, so that's why I was betting the under so hard. This year, their win total is 7.5, which to me is completely insane. I would
Mm.
have it at like probably 9.5, and I'm hammering that even harder than I hammered that under last year because I know this team is going to win. I mean, they might end up winning only 8 or 9, injuries, whatever, but I could easily see them winning 10 or 11 just as easy as 9. The Eagles losing two of their best pass rushers, Barkley being a year older. I mean, they're still the best team in the division, of course. Probably the best team on paper right now in the conference. I do not think they'll go back to the Super Bowl. All it would take is Barkley, injury prone, 28, almost 500 touches last year. All it would take is him missing, high ankle sprain, misses a month, and they might not even make the playoffs. People are, no, I assumed the Eagles 100% we're going to take a pass rusher in the first round. I thought it was going to be Azaraku, honestly. Azaraku, Green, if someone like Nolan dropped, I was like, they are going to take a pass rusher, D end, D tackle. I'm not sure which, because they lost two of their top three pass rushers, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Carter, number one, and Sweat and Milton Williams. I thought Sweat should have been Super Bowl MVP. They won that game because of their defense and because of their pass
Yep.
rush specifically. Cooper, DeJean and the pick six and all this stuff.
Yep.
That pick happened because Josh Sweat walked their left tackle straight back into Mahomes. So the risk with Barkley losing two of their best pass rushers, not doing anything. Like they didn't draft anybody really. They signed Aziz Ojulari, who's like okay, but people are really overestimating. They're like, oh well, the Eagles, pass rush, it's so deep, it's so good, and they're just going to replace these guys with whoever, and they're going to be great. Like, no, that is not going to happen. I think
Mhm.
a month into the season, people are going to be like, oh, what happened to the Eagles pass rush? What happened to the Eagles defense? It's still okay, but it's not what it was. Yeah, because they didn't replace two guys who went out and got paid 100 million each in free agency. The gap between us and the Eagles is smaller than most people think, and I think there is no gap between us and Washington, which a lot of people would probably
Yeah.
balk at. But to me, Washington, most people on the board know that I thought they were overrated last year. They won all these games literally like last second, Hail Mary, all this stuff. I would have them probably around 9 or 10 wins like us. But if you look at their roster, their defense in particular, like I thought they were going to go hard going all in this offseason. They traded for Debo, who may be washed, and they traded for Tunsil, who's 31, who's still good, but it's like I thought they were going to do more, and I'm not really impressed with what they did. To me, I wouldn't be surprised if they won 6 or 7 games. Honestly, if the league catches up to what they were doing with Daniels and like kind of protecting him with the short passing game, I think people are really overlooking how bad their defense is. Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Last year, I thought we were literally neck and neck with the Redskins every time we played them. I mean, it wasn't it wasn't like they looked better than us last year, in my opinion. And last year we weren't particularly good. So I honestly think it's going to be between the Cowboys and the Eagles. And I agree with you. I think the Eagles are going to drop down a bit from last year. Everybody looks at them as a super talented team last year, and they were because they had to overcome, in my opinion, what is a deficient passing quarterback. But I think they've lost some of that talent, and if they're not a super talented team, I think Jalen Hurts is just not capable of being anything more than kind of a system running quarterback that we have seen in the past. And, passing for 120 yards, I just don't think is going to get by next year because I don't think their pass rush and their defense is going to be as good as it was last year. And like you see a running back with that many carries, and inevitably they always kind of fall back to earth the year after. And I have a hard time believing that's not going to happen with Barkley, a guy that's kind of never been consistently year to year dominant in his career.
Yeah, I think as long as Barkley is healthy and as long as their O line is healthy and they have their two receivers, they're going to be a good team. Like, I'm not sitting here saying they're going to be terrible or whatever, but I like Hurts. You're right. You look at his stats last year. You look at the game logs. You look at what he did like in the playoffs. Like, this guy barely cracked 200 yards damn near every game. He had like 18 passing touchdowns or something. And the other thing that nobody really talks about is Nakobe Dean is going to be out for a decent chunk of this season. So their roster is still very talented, and last year it was extremely talented. I mean, with the pass rush, with the corners, Bond breaking out. He was like the Zach Bond signing last year, and he ended up like somewhere around fifth or sixth in Defensive Player of the Year voting. He was like a 1 year, $4 million deal. He was like a Stephen Jones special for them. Him breaking out. Dean was awesome. Obviously the O line, the receivers, Barkley, all this stuff. But to me, there are a lot of risks with a lot of that stuff that people are just glossing over because like, oh, the roster, everything, they're so strong. They're so like they were last year, and now they lost two of their best pass rushers. One of their best linebackers is going to miss a good part of the season. The running back, people now it's like it's hilarious, man. Like, Derrick Henry has this outlier season at the age of 30 or whatever he was. And now all of a sudden, oh, there's no concern given the running back's
Yeah,
age or anything,
everybody
or
can do it.
basically anything that's happened for the last 25 years. Yeah, so it's like Barkley, what happened to McCaffrey last season, where he was injured off and on, their offense floundered without him, could very easily happen to the Eagles this year. And if he's out, Hurts is going to be completely exposed. The D line not being quite as good as it was last year. I think there's definitely potential for if Washington ends up winning another 10 games or so. I could see them, if things go slightly off script, missing the playoffs just because Hurts really is that limited. So it'll be interesting. Yeah. I mean, and the one point I want to make about Washington, let's play a little game here real quick. Outside of Daniels, who are their top 3 to 5 players? You guys
I
can just
guess
like
do they still
name
have
couple players.
Eckler? I guess
They
Eckler.
have Eckler, yeah.
I'd go with McLaurin, I guess.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Who else are we
Hmm.
thinking?
Are we saying strictly
Tunsil, I
on the
guess.
offensive side?
No, the whole team.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Payne. Yeah, Payne is still there, right?
Peyton who?
Deron Payne.
Oh, Deron Payne. Payne, yeah, Payne. Yeah, Payne.
I don't know, man.
Tunsil.
I mean, it's a bunch of old guys, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like last year, Ertz played well for them. He had big stats, which I think was a bit of a fluke. Payne, one thing about Payne, Washington fans do not like him. They think he's overpaid. They have like the last couple years, oh, should we trade him and
Hmm.
this? Like I think he's in a contract year. I don't think anybody expects him back after this season. Uh, so after those guys, you get to like what Dorrance Armstrong, Bobby Wagner, Luvu, and the point I'm making is number one, these names are not impressive, compared to AJ Brown, Jalen Carter, uh, Barkley if he's healthy, Lane
Hmm.
Johnson, so on and so forth. But also compared to us, Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb, Tyler Smith. You know what I mean? Guys like
Hmm. Yeah.
McLaurin and are not they're good, but they're a step below. The second point is they're all old. Like you just said. McLaurin actually quietly, I think he turns 30 this year. I think Debo does also. Tunsil's already 31, I think. Bobby Wagner is like 35. And then we're talking about what, like Dorrance Armstrong. I mean, Ertz is also like 34, 35. So my point is all the hype, this phrase people throw around like working yourself into a shoot. That's what I think they're doing. Like you're buying into your own hype. I think they're buying into what they NFC Championship, one game away from the Super Bowl. Da da
Mm,
da da. Da. That team last year was no better, in my opinion. If you like simulate, anything can happen any given season. To me, that was a 9-win team, maybe 10 at most, absolute most. 8 to 9 wins, had some luck. Tampa Bay honestly should have beaten them the first game. Detroit was out of their minds in that playoff game. Would have beaten them basically in any other scenario. And now it's like, oh, we're one game away from the Super Bowl and all this kind of stuff. Your roster, the year before, you won about 4 games. You signed a bunch of free agents, okay. But like, it's not that impressive, number one. Number two, it's old.
yeah,
And they traded picks. They traded a lot of picks for Tunsil. They traded picks for Debo. They traded picks for Marshawn Lattimore. Maybe you could throw him in there. He's also about
mm,
30.
yeah.
So to me, like, they are way overrated. And yeah, I mean, if I had to predict, the standings this year, I'd, still go Philadelphia just because they're the safe chalk pick, you know, play out these different scenarios. But I'd have us second, Washington third, Giants fourth. I think Washington is closer to the Giants than they are to Philadelphia. I'll put it that way. I mean, it's saying a lot, but like if you go through the Giants roster, and I mean, of course, quarterback is the most important position. You go through the Giants roster: Malik Neighbors, Dexter Lawrence, Abdul
Mhm.
Carter, Brian Burns. These are better players than the guys we just named on Washington.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a little bit
So
younger of a core too. So,
that too,
uh,
yeah, yep.
I guess Washington is still figuring it out. They have a new team, new management structure in place, while we, on the other hand, have been learning on the job for 30 some years now. So,
Yeah, I mean, you can't take away, they went to the NFC Championship, did all this stuff, but like to me, it's just a huge fluke. But maybe maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
well,
Daniels is going to be the next Lamar Jackson.
you know
We'll
what's
see.
so frustrating though is we've had some terrible teams in the last 20 years, but we've had some really good teams and some really special years, and still didn't have enough to get to that championship game like their lucky asses did. So that's
That's what
that
drives you
sucks.
nuts. I mean,
Yep.
that Tampa Bay had that game, that first game. Tampa Bay had that game. Mayfield like fumbled, like just it wasn't even like anything Washington did to force it. He just like bumped into his running back as he was going to hand it off, fumbled it. Washington got it, got the lead back in the fourth, and Detroit, all the turnovers, all that stuff. Like, yeah, our teams the last 10 years, we've basically only missed the playoffs when we've had an injured quarterback. And last year we would have missed the playoffs, if Dak stayed healthy. But ultimately, all these years where we really like sucked, you had injured Romo, injured Dak in 2020, injured Dak last year. Aside from that, almost every single season we're in the playoffs. And we still somehow the universe or the deal Jerry made with Satan, we can't get this little bit of luck in the second round to make an NFC Championship game, and it makes no sense. But here we are.